Shrindala Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmaya Shri Gurave Namaha. I'm first of all offering millions and millions of Dandavat Pranams unto the lotus feet of our most beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Astal Tarasara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And I'm offering the same millions and millions of times unto the lotus feet of our most beloved Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Astal Tarasara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And all our illustrious Rupanuga Guru Varga, my Dandavat Pranams, and all the Vaishnava and Vaishnavi devotees of the Lord, my Dandavat Pranams to all of you. So today, again, is an exceptional day. Ekadashi Vrat. Ekadashi means fasting, but fasting means really running very fast to Krishna. This is really the meaning of Ekadashi. So, just for your information, today we took darshan, beautiful darshan, early morning of Lord Jagannath on his cart at the Singadwaha gate, which was very ecstatic, millions of people, but very exhilarating to be there and to see all the devotion in so many millions of people is, of course, truly inspiring. So today we're coming to our chapter, and we'll read again the Foul Shruti. So we're doing this Foul Shruti in 3 sections. In 3 days, we're covering the whole Foul Shruti, so that I get a chance to say something about the Foul Shruti, just to elaborate and bring the Foul Shruti more to our consciousnesses. Okay, so verse 11, Jaiva-Dharma Chapter.
Jaiva-Dharma Pate se Shuddha Bhakti hai, Jaiva-Dharma na padile Kabu Bhakti nai.
One who reads Jaiva-Dharma with faithful deliberation will surely attain Shuddha Bhakti. But one who does not read Jaiva-Dharma can never attain Bhakti. This is because Jaiva-Dharma contains, my Gurudev used to describe it, or it was described as the entire ocean in a jar. There's nothing missing from this Jaiva-Dharma. So therefore, if you don't read this Jaiva-Dharma, you're denying yourself the opportunity to, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes so many Bhagavatam verses, so many verses from so many Shastras. It's totally packed with full, it's like all of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Siddhantic erudition is in these pages of this Jaiva-Dharma. So if you don't read this, if you don't touch this, what sort of, how unfortunate is that? And he's saying very clearly that one who does not read Jaiva-Dharma can never attain Bhakti. It goes from the Sambandha Jnana to the Avideya to the Prayojan, especially the Prayojan in the last 14 chapters, which are exactly running parallel to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Every chapter we find that when we come to that section, we can parallel it completely to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and it carries us to Radha Dasyan. So it's the entirety, going from the very beginning stages of Nishta and Ruchi, etc., and carrying right through to Prem, Bhav and Prem, and beyond. Sneha, Man, Rag, Anurag, Bhav, Mahabhav, all of these highest stages of separation are described. So why would anyone deny themselves the opportunity to actually immerse in this Jaiva-Dharma? Okay, Prabhu.
Rupanuga Abhiman Pate Dridhai, Jaiva-Dharma Vimukake Dharma hi nakai.
Again, faithfully. The first time was faithfully, this time is faithfully. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is making a point. Every word we'll find in Jaiva-Dharma is loaded with significance. Nothing is superfluous, nothing. There's no sentence that is just a throwaway sentence or anything like that. Every single word and letter practically is pointed and direct and sharp. This again is an indication of a transcendental literature. It's absolutely not anything to do with a novel or a mundane presentation whatsoever. This is Shastra, pure Shastra. in its very essence for this age in Kali Yuga. So faithfully reading Jaiva-Dharma will surely strengthen one's abhiman as a Rupanuga, follower of Rupa Goswami. Again, he says this in the very beginning. This direction, where are we going? We're following Srila Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami was the first general, we can say, in Mahaprabhu's army. The army that Mahaprabhu attracted to himself consisted primarily of the 6 Goswamis. They were the ones who captured the mission. Nityananda Prabhu was doing all the preaching in Bengal, while Mahaprabhu had the opulence just to reside in Puridam. And he was working with Advaita Acharya. The two of them were the most stalwart devotees, and they were spreading all this in Bengal. But Mahaprabhu, he was just immersing himself in fulfilling his 3 desires. Shri Radhaya Pranaya Mahima Kidrisho Vanaiva. Swadhyena Adbhuta Madhurima Kidrisho Vamadya. Sokyam Kasyam Mad Anubhavita Kidrisham Gatilobhat. Tad Bhavadya Samajani Sachigadavo Sindhu Harindu. This verse is written actually by Swarup Damodar. These 2 verses, this verse and the verse before that, Shri Radha Krishna Pranaya Vikritya, this is also written by Swarup Damodar. And Krishna's Kaviraj is taking these verses in honor of Swarup Damodar. And the verse before that, of course, Anapita Chirin Chirat Kurunai Varatinokalo Samad Paitam Unata Ujvala Rasam Swabhakti Shriyam Hari Purata Sundarata Dikatam Vasadipita Sada Pradare Kandare Suratu Vasachinandana. This is written directly by Rupa Goswami. And Srila Krishna's Kaviraj quotes it 3 times in honor of Rupa Goswami. So Chaitanya Charitamrita is Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavat, these 2 granthas we have, and Chaitanya Mangal. But the most scholarly presentation, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada said, is this Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chaitanya Bhagavat is filled with emotional moods and beautiful descriptions of the relationships between Mahaprabhu and his Nityasiddha Parikas. Krishnadas Kaviraj, he relates completely what actually happened in Puri, coming from Swarup Damodar, those kadachas that he had, and coming from Raghunath Das Goswami. And he was writing this in Radha Kund. So this Chaitanya Charitamrita is like our backbone, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes extensively from Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this is another aspect that we are getting from the Jaiva-Dharma. But it's very explicit that this is following Rupanuga. Rupa Goswami, Rupa Manjari, he's a Manjari. So all of our Rupanuga Guru Varga, they are all Manjaris. Every single one of them is a Manjari. There's no drop in that. It's not that one is something else. Baladeva Vibhushan, I think, is a Gopi, actually. I'm not sure if he's a Manjari. I have to check, but I think he's a Gopi. But everyone else is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is Vinod Manjari. All are Manjaris. So this is what Mahaprabhu has come to give. This Swa Bhakti Shriyam. This was his gift. He's come to taste himself this Unnata Ujvala Ras. That's what he's tasting, Prem Ras. That's what he's tasting himself. But the teachings are all emanating from Rupa Goswami. So Rupa Goswami has to be highlighted and prominent throughout. Where is this Jaiva-Dharma taking us? It's taking us to the lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami, 100%. So this is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is writing in his Falshruti. One who is averse to reading Jaiva-Dharma is certainly devoid of religious principles. So it's like in the verse previously, where he says that if you do not read Jaiva-Dharma, you can never attain bhakti. So it's like this, the Swarup Lakshan and the Tatashta Lakshan in verses, the prominent and the less prominent aspect. So this understanding of not reading Jaiva-Dharma is less prominent, but at the same time, it's a message to everyone that we should embrace this Jaiva-Dharma regularly. Okay, Prabhu.
Okay. Javat Jivana Jai Pade Jaiva-Dharma Bhaktiman Se Jane Vritta Jnana Karma.
One who faithfully reads Jaiva-Dharma, again, faithfully, we've had faith in 3 verses. One who faithfully reads Jaiva-Dharma throughout his entire life will be endowed with bhakti and will surely realize the futility of gyan and karma. So being endowed with bhakti, this is not just actually bhakti, it's braja ras, because this is what Mahaprabhu has come to give. Advaita Acharya could have given bhakti. Many acharyas can give bhakti. Bhakti was present previously. Vaidhi bhakti was present, but not rag marg was present. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, what's he crafting here is he's actually taking the heart, the sensitive heart of the sadhak, and bringing him to a place of Radha Dasya. This is a tremendous feat to be able to do something like that, to bring someone not just to bhakti, but to bhakti ras and braja ras. This is like a huge undertaking. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was just monumental personality, really, and he took this challenge to, he's directly the seventh Goswami. This is what we always appreciate by absorbing this book and its precepts, his qualities and everything, because he gave us all of Navadvip. Who else described Navadvip? Who opened all the pastime places? Like the Goswamis were asked by Mahaprabhu to open up what Brajanava had actually left behind, all the deities. So Rupa and Sanatan, Raghunath Das, Jiva Goswami, Gopal, Raghunath Mata, they all went to Vrindavan, went uncovering Vrindavan. But what about Navadvip? It was left in the hands, the capable hands of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And in his Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, in his Navadvip Taranga, Navadvip Bhav Taranga, he has described all of these different pastime places. And he even located the Yog Pit. Without the Yog Pit being located, we wouldn't have anywhere to actually focus of Mahaprabhu's advent. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given us this, really. Faithfully reach Jaiva-Dharma throughout his entire life will be in that back, and will surely realize the futility of Gyan and Karma. Gyan Kand and Karma Kand were the two sort of supports that Vyasadeva was using when he was writing the Srimad Bhagavatam initially. It was only in the 7th chapter of the 1st canto when he's met Narad, because he feels despondent. In the 4th, 5th, and 6th chapters of the 1st canto, he feels despondent. But in the 7th chapter, then there's a revelation, and he actually sees Krishna being bound by Mother Yashoda, etc. He sees what is the nature of Vrindavan. So then he gets the whole perspective on where is the Bhagavatam going. Because prior to that, it appears that he didn't understand or didn't have realization of that. That's what Bhagavatam reveals to us in those early chapters, 4, 5, and 6 of the 1st canto, because he was feeling he'd written so much, the Mahabharata, Itihasya, so many Puranas. He'd already written the first 9 cantos had already been written when he was feeling like that. But the 10th canto, the lotus face of the Lord, that loving aspect, that Madhurya aspect was not there. And Mahaprabhu has only come to give this amazing gift, because prior to Mahaprabhu, this Madhurya was not on the map. Jaidev Goswami writes some things, but he couldn't even write this Smaragarala Kandanam, Mama Sirasya Mandaram, Dehi Pada Halavamudam. He couldn't write that. So we understand that this Bhakti Ras was only, or Parakya Ras, it was only Mahaprabhu Krishna himself. And then he gives it through the Goswamis, which have come down to us today. So this is the package that we've got today. Totally, totally exclusive. It wasn't in Satya Yuga, it wasn't in Treta Yuga, Dwarpa Yuga. It's only at the tail end, or the beginning rather, of Kali Yuga.
Okay. Krishnera amala seva labhi se nara seva sukhe magna rahe sada Krishna para.
Such a man, being fully devoted to Sri Sri Radha Krishna Yugal Kishore, and having attained their Amol Prem Seva, remains forever merged in the bliss of such immaculate, loving service. So this is very powerful, that this is the conclusion of this Jaiva-Dharma, to attain this Amol Prem Seva. This Amol Prem Seva is the conclusion, that service to Sri Radha and Krishna. This is the conclusion. We might have to open that door, just to power. Then there's a foot. Oh, there we go. No problem. Come back on again. Is it coming again? Yeah, here it comes. Okay, so now we go to our beginning of chapter 12. I'd just like to recap today, and I'd like to make a habit daily of recapping through the chapters. We have, I have different Bhagavatam study groups, and I'm always encouraging all of them to refresh the previous chapters. If we don't refresh where we've come from with Kali Yuga minds and memories, we're going to forget it. And we're going to have no consistency or context of the entire presentation. It's just going to be lost in a jumble. We need to actually bring ourselves up to speed every time we have the opportunity to do that. So my Gurudev has, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, has described that out of all the 40 chapters in Jaiva-Dharma, the first 4 are the most significant. And out of the first 4, the first 2 are the most significant. And out of the first 2, the first 1 is the most significant. So we start off with chapter 1. This contains the entirety of our Rupa Nuga Siddhanta. We have association in the sense that Vaishnava Thakur, he meets that devotee, and this is what starts him on his trip out of Brahmagyan. He's a Brahmagyani sannyasi. So out of that mentality, just like Shukadev Goswami was like a Brahmavad, but he was attracted to these teachings. So Shukadev is like Sannyasi Thakur. This is modeled in the same mood as Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not any different. So, and then he is associating with Prem Das Babaji. This is in the first chapter. I'm just going to go very briefly through all the chapters up to chapter 12 to give us some kind of handle, we can say, or some kind of appreciation of the context where we're going. So in the first chapter, Vaishnava Sannyasi Thakur meets Prem Das Babaji, and there's a whole description of Godrum, which is Navadvip, which is the whole backdrop for the first 25 chapters. So this is the land of Mahaprabhu. So there's extensive descriptions there, very beautiful. And then at one point, Bhaktivinoda Thakur reveals how Prem Das Babaji in his meditation is calling to Vaishnava Das, giving him his name, Raman Manjari, silence the monkey Kakati, because Ananga Manjari, she's looking, and Lalita Saki will become unhappy. So this is our line, Lalita Saki, Ananga Manjari, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who is Vinod Manjari. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving us this straight away in the first chapter. This is why the first chapter actually contains everything. And then in the first chapter, Sannyasi Thakur, that's who he is at that time, he asked that very beautiful question: if Dharma is one, then how come there are so many religions? And that he's asked so many people around in his travels about the nature of religion being one. So then Prem Das Babaji, he describes about a Vastu, 3 Vastus, Krishna, Jiva, and Maya. And he describes about Dharma being one, essentially one. And any religion that doesn't have pure Dharma in its forefront is not really a substantial religion. There's some defect there. It just has, we talked yesterday about Islam and Christianity, etc. So this is the first chapter, very, very powerful. Then in the second chapter, Sannyasi Thakur asks a beautiful question. He says, if the Jiva is infinitesimal, then how can he be pure and eternal? If his size is infinitesimal, how can he be pure and eternal? This second chapter is entitled Nityadam and Naimitikdam. This is just like in Bhagavad Gita, the second chapter. Second chapter is describing that I'm not the body, that I'm pure spirit soul. So in the second chapter here, it's also describing the same principle, comparing Nitya Dharma and Naimitic Dharma. And then he also asks if the jiva is pure and totally without defect, how can he be eternal? How is the jiva eternal if at the time of he was constituted, he, let me just read this question, because these two questions are what make up the second chapter. These two questions are really exceptional. He says, and if the natural function of the jiva is formed at the time he is constituted, how can that function be eternal? So this is what the whole second chapter is actually about. It's answering this question, or these two questions of Sannyasi Thakur. So we have two questions in each of the first and second chapters. And then in the third chapter, Sannyasi Thakur has now become Vaishnava Das Babaji. So we're getting a story-like context, because in this age especially, we like stories. So there's some sequence to it in a story line. So then Vaishnava, Sannyasi Thakur has become Vaishnava Das Babaji. And then Lahari Mahashai, who's just a regular Kirtaniya attendant and a scholarly type of a person, but in the material sense, a Brahmin by birth, he starts to question the Vaishnavas, and in a nice way, in a cordial way, in a respectful way. So the Vaishnavas give him some time. And then Prem Das Babaji requests Vaishnava Das Babaji to answer Lahari's questions about Sandhya Vandanam, because he can't believe how this worship of Sandhya that the Brahmins perform daily is not Nitya, that it's only Naimitic. So that whole chapter is about that explanation. And then again, this is all relationship, as I said before. It's relationship in the beginning between Prem Das Babaji and Sannyasi Thakur. And then the second chapter, again, Sannyasi Thakur and Prem Das Babaji. And now it's Vaishnava Das Babaji and Lahari Mahashai. And then again, in the fourth chapter, it's Lahari Mahashai has taken great faith in Vaishnava Das Babaji's words, and then he's accepting him like guru. So again, we're getting this guru-shishya relationship, which is prevalent all the way through. There's always a master and someone who is instructing and someone who is listening. So four chapters and these personalities in each chapter. So that brings us up to the fifth chapter. And in the fifth chapter, Lahari Mahashai, he takes the role of guru now. And he starts to instruct his son, Devidas. So now there's a story aspect to that, where Lahari Mahashai's previous family in Shantipur, etc. And they come to try and bring him back. And Devidas is the one who goes up to Godrum to try to bring him back. And he witnesses in the fifth chapter the Vaishnavas exchanges, and he becomes very impressed. But then one Muslim comes and starts to ask some questions, and he sees how the Vaishnavas welcome that Muslim. And he's very bewildered by that. How can you put the Muslims on the same platform as the Vaishnavas? So in the sixth chapter, he becomes really disturbed by that and collects all these Brahmins, Chudamani, etc. They come to challenge the Vaishnavas. Smarta Brahmins are coming to challenge. So this sixth chapter is very dense, and it's very pertinent to the times where the Brahmins don't accept this Vaishnava cult. And it's so much praman is there for Vaishnava Dharma. Bhaktivinoda Thakur really takes on a load in this sixth chapter in particular, battling the Smarta Brahmins with the Vaishnavas. And the conclusion of that sixth chapter is the Vaishnavas, the Brahmanas, they walk away chanting Hari Bol, Hari Bol. They're very much praising the erudition and scholarship of Vaishnava Das, but it doesn't say conclusively whether their hearts have changed. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was very sensitive about this. He shows us that we are, like Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada said, We are just like the deliverers of the message. And Supersoul, within the heart of those people we're speaking to, is the one who's going to actually make that individual realize that message or not. It's not actually us who are going to make someone have realization of that. It's Supersoul within the heart that has to be indicating to the individual, yes, this is 100% the correct. They have to be convinced. There's an expression in English: a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So you can't coerce people into this. It has to be digested and reconciled by the individual. So that's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur leaves us with in the 6th chapter. Then in the 7th chapter, again, we come into relationships, but now we've come into the conditioned souls completely. Bhaktivinoda Thakur pulls us into a family situation where Chandidas and Damayanti, his wife, they've stashed all their gold and belongings under the house, and the children, they're not supporting their old parents. They kick them out of the house basically, and they go on pilgrimage to Navadvip, and they hear while they're in Navadvip on the second day that their room has been broken into and their children have discovered their hidden wealth. And of course, they are mortified with this material catastrophe in their lives, which happens to all of people in life. We get these tremendous catastrophes that can come in our life. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is making it very real, but the outcome is that Chandidas, he has a little grocery shop after some time, begs some money, but now he changes his miserly ways, which he was previously, and starts feeding and serving the Vaishnavas. As a result of that Sukriti, he meets one Vaishnava called Yadavadas, and Yadavadas takes him across the river to the sadhus, to the Vaishnavas, and he meets Anantadas Babaji there, who enlightens him in Sambandha Gyan again. So all the way through to the 7th chapter, we're just dealing in these amazing topics of Sambandha Gyan. Then the 8th chapter is Nityananda Prabhu, and he's they're sitting under the Nityananda Vat, and the question arises about Kanishta, Madhyam, and Uttam Bhaktas. So this is a very important chapter, 8, which Bhaktivinoda Thakur has just slotted in there for the Vaishnavas to realize what is Vaishnava etiquette, what is the principle of Vaishnava etiquette. And this is beautifully opened out by Nityananda Das. And then, Nityananda Das Babaji opens this out. Nityananda is the name of the questioning sadhak in the end. So this is very, very beautiful chapter. But this is the content of the chapter. Again, it's Sambandha Gyan. And then the 9th chapter is when now he's Advaita Das Babaji. Now Lahari has become Advaita. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is showing the progression of the individuals who he's setting as his characters, how they evolve. And it's as if we are evolving with these individuals. If you immerse yourself into these individuals, like Sannyasi Thakur, we become like Vaishnava Das Babaji. It's in a sense, we empathize with these personalities so that we can grow with them. So Lahari Mahashai is now Advaita Das Babaji. And his old school friend, Digambar, who's just the complete antithesis of a devotee, he's associated with Muslims and dined in their courts and everything, and is firmly supporting material civilization. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur has a beautiful window open to explain the degradation of Kali Yuga religions, which basically in this case is the civilization of the Muslims and meat eating and so on like this. And Digambar is putting forward all sorts of fallacious ideas about how to be happy in this material. He's a Kali worshipper. He's a tantriki. So this is what this 9th chapter is about. Very dense chapter, very beautiful chapter. And then we get to the 10th chapter, which is the history, the authenticity. Because again, Bhaktivinoda Thakur puts it into the Brahmins' hands, these smarta Brahmin hands, and they're not satisfied with this Vaishnava Dharma taking over their livelihood, because the Brahmins would always collect money and so on at the temples. And now this has been taken away by the mood of Vaishnavism, the locals, now all the locals can have access to all these granthas. Actually, many of the books were brought into the Bengali vernacular so that they would have access to all different laymen. And the Brahmanas were not happy with that because they were being knocked off their pedestal, so to speak, because they were very proud of their position. So they come to challenge the Vaishnavas about the authenticity of Vaishnava Dharma. Again, this is a tremendous jewel that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given us to appreciate the authentic. Where does Vaishnava Dharma begin? It's described, it begins in antiquity. It begins with Lord Brahma and the creation of the whole material world. That's where it actually begins. So it has no beginning in material time. So then this is all mapped out and beautifully described. And any preacher who doesn't take these precepts, into the world is denying himself the greatest tool for his delivery of people, etc. We need to be conversant with these topics. And then in the 11th chapter we just concluded yesterday was the Mullah, Ayanda Sahib, coming to ask about deity worship and material objects, etc. And this is an absolutely fascinating chapter, which we just finished yesterday. And basically, it's impersonal if it doesn't have a Thakurji form. If there's no form in our worship, then this is Mayavad, or at least Brahmavad. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he writes this down very beautifully. So these are the first 11 chapters that I've just tried to map out very briefly. So each day I'm going to just touch on something of those chapters, probably more briefly than I did today. Today was the first time or second time I've done it sort of in some detail, but we need to get the thread, to get the consistency, to get these step by step, just like we do in the Bhagavatam. It's so helpful in the Bhagavatam to hear back 6 cantos, and every chapter basically, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth cantos, and where is it taking us? What are all the highlights of those chapters? It brings us up to an appreciation of the whole jewel. These chapters are like on a thread of a locket. They're all jewels, but getting the whole thread, the consistency, is very refreshing and strengthening for the sadhak embarking. We need to get to know this Jaiva-Dharma in the way that I've just described, the chapters coming through, to become fluent in where are the different precepts. If we're questioned at any time in any preaching program about the authenticity, for example, we can go straight to chapter 10. If we're questioned about anything, we should know roughly where to go for those particular truths where they're being taught. So now we're coming to chapter 12, which is entitled Nitya Dharma and Sadhana. So this is a very, very important chapter completely. I'm so hot here. Can you reach that fan up there? I just used a bit of hand fan. This AC is useless. Doesn't seem to be doing anything. Thank you. Thank you. No. Okay. So I'll just read carefully. Chapter 12, Nitya Dharma and Sadhana. This is on page, in my book, 257. If anyone's reading, yes. Sri Navadvip Dham Mandal is supreme among all holy places of the world. Like Sri Vrindavan, it covers an area of 32 square miles and is shaped like an 8-petaled lotus flower. The center of that lotus is Sri Antadvip, the core of which is Sri Mayapur. It's only Bhaktivinoda Thakur, by the way, who has given us this map of Navadvip Dham. If you push that rubber thing down, then it'll stay open. Yeah. In the north of Sri Mayapur is Srimantadvip, where a temple of Srimanta Devi is situated. To the north of this temple is the village of Bilva Pushkarini. To the south lies Brahma Pushkarini, That area, which is located in the northern section of Sri Navadvip, is commonly referred to as Sumulya. So this again confirms that this is not a fictitious novel. This is a factual treatise and document about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission and about how it has taken root at this particular time and what are the precepts of that mission. At the time of Sri Mahaprabhu, Sumulya was the residence of many learned pundits. The father of Sachidev, Sri Nilambara Chakravarti Mahashai, that's Sachidev, the mother of Mahaprabhu. Sri Nilambara Chakravarti Mahashai had also lived in this village. Now, not far from where Nilambara Chakravarti's house still stood, lived a Vedic Brahmana named Brajanath Bhattacharya. Brajanath had been brilliant from his childhood. He had studied in a Sanskrit school in Bilva, Pushkarini, and he had become such a superior scholar of the science of logic, Nyaya Shastra. This is what most of these scholars were into, because it exercised the muscles of their brains to turn a clay pot into a piece of cloth, and then to turn it back from a piece of cloth into a clay pot. They felt very proud. Basically, it's stirring pride in those personalities who would follow this path. It's not about humility. It's about defeating in debates different personalities. So the whole focus and attention is on like Keshav Kashmiri, when he comes during Mahaprabhu's time, that Digvijay, to defeat everybody. And Mahaprabhu very beautifully, that's a beautiful pastime. But all of these places that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is mentioning are still there today. We can go anytime to the place of Nilambar Chakravarti Thakur, this grandfather of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and have darshan of his courtyard there. It's still there, very clear. All of these things are there. So now we're going into another character. This character is going to sit with us right the way through till about the 35th, 36th chapter. He's there right through. And he's been described here as someone brilliant with excellent sanskars and sukriti. This is who Bhaktivinoda Thakur is choosing to represent the evolution of the Vaishnava consciousness within his heart, how he can become attracted to this Vaishnava's Siddhanta. He had studied in a Sanskrit school in Bilva Pushkarini, and he had become such a superior scholar of the science of logic, Nyaya Shastra, that his ingenious and innovative arguments embarrassed and intimidated all the renowned scholars of Bilva Pushkarini. This is what I just said. They like to intimidate and embarrass. It's all about fear. They're trying to generate fear, not love. It's not about that mood. It's Vaidhi Bhakti at best, or at least. Brahmana Pushkarini, Mayapur, Godrum, Madhyadvip, Amragat, Samudragar, Kulia, Puravistali, and other places. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is allowing us a window into Navadvip today by mentioning all these different places. Wherever there was a gathering of pundits, Brajanath Nyaya Panchanana would set the assembly ablaze with a barrage of unprecedented arguments. Among these pundits was a cruel-hearted logician named Nayika. How do you say that, Bula? Nayika Chudamani.
Yes.
Who was deeply mortified by the wounds he had received from the sharp blows of Brajanath's logic. He writes so beautifully, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, so graphically. This logician resolved to kill Naya Panchanana using the occult knowledge described in the Tantra Shastra, by which one can invoke another's death through mystical incantations. To this end, he moved into the crematorium ground of Rudradvip, and Rudradvip, of course, is the place of Shivji, and began to utter death mantras day and night. It was Amavasya, the night of the new moon, and dense darkness prevailed all the four directions. At midnight, Nyayika Chudamani sat in the middle of the crematorium ground and called out to his worshipable deity, "O mother, you are the only worshipable deity in this Kali Yuga. I have heard that you become pleased simply by the recitation of a few mantras, and that you easily bestow benedictions upon your worshippers. O goddess with a terrifying face, this servant of yours has undergone tremendous hardship in reciting your mantras for many days. Please be merciful upon me just once. O mother, although I am plagued with many faults, you are still my mother. Please excuse all my faults and appear before me today." We should understand that this tantric, the roots of tantricism, I think, are in Bengal. It's like certainly around the place of Navadvip. There are so many tantrics today because Durga Ma, this is the most important worship place of Durga Ma. This is where Durga Ma is worshipped. Yes, he's brought a fan for us. This is the most the biggest proliferation of tantrics is there in Navadvip. In this way, repeatedly calling out with cries of distress, Nyaya Chudamani offered oblations in the fire while uttering a mantra in the name of Brajanath Nyaya Panchanana. How astonishing. You can turn it down a little bit. More.
Come. Oh, minimum.
It's okay. I don't know how much this is going to be disturbing the microphone. This microphone blowing, but it's okay. It's okay. Today, I'll just have to speak more loudly. I hope people can hear. It is very hot in here today. In this way, repeatedly calling out with cries of distress, Nyaya Chudamani offered oblations in the fire while uttering a mantra in the name of Brajanath Nyaya Panchanana. How astonishing was the power of that mantra! The sky immediately became overcast with a mass of dense, dark clouds. A fierce wind began to blow, and deafening peals of thunder roared. Hideous ghosts and evil spirits could be seen in the intermittent flashes of lightning. With the help of the sacrificial wine, Chudamani summoned all his energy and called out, "O mother, please do not delay another moment." So Chudamani is intoxicated with the wine. Simultaneously, he's intoxicated with his anger and hatred of Brajanath, and all this mixing together with this Kali Puja that he's been performing builds a powerful energy, and Kali Ma is going to respond. Just then, an oracle from the heavens replied, "Do not worry. Brajanath Nyaya Panchanana will not discuss the Nyaya Shastras for long. Within a few days, he will give up debating and remain silent. He will no longer be your rival. Be peaceful and return home." Amazing. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had many experiences of this sort, like was it Bishak Shain, when he was here in Puri as the district magistrate, battling these mystical personalities when his daughter practically died. He was also inflicted during that court case. So he personally, we know, and if you read his autobiography, there's many instances where Bhaktivinoda Thakur has to deal with this kind of thing. There was one time one tree was ghostly haunted and was disturbing a whole village, and he sat under it and read the whole Srimad Bhagavatam loudly to that tree. It was a Brahma Rakshasa. And that tree at the end of his recitation just collapsed, just fell over. So there's many instances when Bhaktivinoda Thakur would combat this. So he's writing from first-hand experience about this. Yes, Kali Ma does exist. Yes, she can be accessed through these mantras. This is not fictitious. This is not a novel. When the Pandit heard this oracle, he became satisfied. He repeatedly offered pranams to Mahadev, the chief of the Devas and author of the Tantra, and then returned to his own home. Brajanath Nyaya Panchanana had become a Digvijay Pandit, one who has conquered the four directions through scholarship. At the age age of 21. Day and night he studied the books of the famous logician Sri Ganga Upadhyaya, Ganga Upadhyaya, who had initiated a new system of logic known as Navya Nyaya. Brajanath had found many faults in Kanai Bhatta Shiromani's Diditi, which was a celebrated commentary on Gangesh Upadhyaya's Tantra Chintamani, and he had begun to write his own commentary. Although he never thought of material enjoyment, the word Paramatha, spiritual reality, never so much as entered his ears. Now he's writing about this to indicate all types of people like Brajanath. They're not like all in chapter 7 we were talking, or chapter 6 we were talking about, when all the pundits came and challenged the Vaishnavas. They've never really thought about the Purusartha. They never thought about praying and their relationship with Krishna. At most, they thought about moksha. And this is prevalent in India today. They're only thinking about moksha. They're not thinking about much else. His single focus in life was to initiate logical debates using the concepts and terminology of Nyaya, such as achadita, the property of an object by which it is distinguished from everything else. Vyavacheda, exclusion of one object from another. Gata, a clay pot, and pata, a piece of cloth. While sleeping, dreaming, eating, or moving about, his heart was filled with thoughts about the nature of objects, the nature of time, and the peculiarities of aqueous and terrestrial properties. So right into material conceptions, and using the brilliance of his mind to be able to debate about the reality of those material properties. This Nyaya Shastra is still very prevalent today around Navadvip. One evening, Brajanath was sitting on the bank of the Ganga, contemplating the 16 categories propounded by Gautam in his system of logic, when a new student of the Nyaya Shastra approached him. Nyaya Panchanani Mahashaya, said the student, you have heard Nimai Pandit's logical refutation of the atomic theory of creation? Nyaya Panchanami roared like a lion. Who is Nimai Pandit? Are you speaking about the son of Jagannath Mishra? Tell me about his logical arguments. Full of pride. There's a mood. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was describing these, but who are these people that we're going to get involved with? And we're going to go through his whole change of consciousness. He's giving us a picture of them. The student said, a great person named Nimai Pandit lived in Navadvip just a short time ago. He composed many innovative logical arguments related to the Nyaya Shastra and thus embarrassed Kanai Bhatta Shiromani. During his time, there was no scholar equal to him in mastery of the Nyaya Shastra. Yet, even though he was so adept in the Nyaya Shastra, he considered it quite insignificant. Indeed, he regarded not only the Nyaya Shastra, but the entire material world as trifling. He therefore adopted the life of a wandering mendicant in the renounced order and traveled from place to place, propagating the chanting of Harinam. Present-day Vaishnavas accept him as Purna Brahm, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they worship him with the Sri Gaura Hari mantra. Nyaya Panchanani Mahashaya, you must look into his dialectical arguments at least once. This is a monumental paragraph because it's the first time in his life that Brajanath's been introduced to Nimai Pandit or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the tipping point for him, this very paragraph. It's just like when Sannyasi Thakur in the first chapter, he saw the Vaishnava dancing and slipping in ecstasy. This is his turning point. This is going to begin his whole journey out of his conditioned consciousness. After hearing such praise of Nimai Pandit's logical reasoning, Rajanath Nyaya Panchanani became quite curious to hear his arguments. With difficulty, he was able to collect a few of those arguments from various sources. Yes, with difficulty. They weren't kept Mahaprabhu's refutations with Nyaya Shastra. They weren't things that people thought were actually important, but they were still present. They were found eventually from various arguments from various sources. Human nature is such that when one develops faith in a particular subject, he will naturally feel regard for the teachers of that subject. Very important that when we develop faith in any subject, like we have such faith in Vyasadeva, because the subjects that he's delivering in Srimad Bhagavatam. So we have complete faith in this personality. All the personalities from the Bhagavatam we have faith in. So this faith is, all of this collectively is giving us this powerful shraddha to move forward. Faith is something that always has to be growing. It's never static. It's always ecstatic. It's always increasing. No one can say, yes, my faith has reached its limit, because then there's no question of achintya bhav coming in. This astonishing dynamic. Everything is astonishing. So like our faith in Jagannath today must have increased in every single person there. Not that their faith was fixed forever. Oh yes, we know Jagannath. We don't. It's just the nature of that potency will just raise the consciousness. That's what it does. It has to be moving. Moreover, he's saying, will naturally feel regard for the teachers of that subject. Moreover, for various reasons, common people do not easily develop faith in exalted personalities who are still living, whereas they tend to develop great faith in the activities of Mahajans who have passed away. Don't miss any single sentence. I mean, that's a great sentence. We tend to revere people who have left their bodies. I can remember my Gurudev. He would be sitting with us in a very sort of familiar, congenial way. And he said to us one time in Gopinath Bhavan, oh, when I leave this world, you will all revere me so much. You will like put me on another platform. I'm just here. This is who I am, just in madhurya, in sweetness, without all the Aishwarya drum roll. But he said, when I leave this body, then you will all praise and glorify me so much. And it hasn't even really begun to happen as it's going to happen in the future. Just like we honor Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, like so, erudite personality who's giving us so much. But actually in his time, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur would have just been a very simple, humble sadhu that we probably would have just walked past on the street, but now he's been proclaimed, like a great Mahajan. So similarly to this, we don't revere them so much while they're alive, but after they've left this world, then we start honoring them. Nyaya Panchanana developed unshakable faith in Nimai Pandit by studying his logical thesis. So he could develop this faith because Nimai Pandit has left this world. That's what he's saying. If Nimai Pandit was still on the planet, perhaps Brajanath would not have developed that same sort of faith. But because he's left and his history is written and we can see the conclusion of his life more or less, then Brajanath is ready to embrace that person by hearing about him. Brajanath would say, "O Nimai Pandit, if I had been born during your time, there is no telling how much I could have learned from you. O Nimai Pandit, kindly enter my heart just once. You are truly Purna Brahm, for otherwise, how could such extraordinary logical arguments have come from your mind? You are undoubtedly Gora Hari, for you have destroyed the darkness of ignorance by creating such remarkable arguments." The darkness of ignorance is black, but you have removed it by becoming Gora, fair-complexioned. You are Hari, because you can steal the minds of the entire world. You have stolen away my heart with the ingenuity of your logic. So this is gaining Brajanath a lot of Sukriti points. Glorifying Nimai Pandit like this, in such a beautiful way, this is going to really elevate his consciousness tremendously. Repeatedly speaking in this way, Brajanath became somewhat frantic. He called out loudly, "O Nimai Pandit, O Gora Hari, please be merciful to me. When will I be able to create logical arguments like yours? If you are merciful unto me, there is no telling how great a scholar of the Nyaya Shastra I may become." So it's all fueled by his pratishta, by that mood of wanting to gain something in this world. Nevertheless, now it's focused on Nimai Pandit. It's brought him into his life, into his heart. So now everything's going to change because of this, because of his calling out to Mahaprabhu. Rajanath thought to himself, "It seems to me that those who worship Gora Hari must also be attracted to Nimai Pandit's scholarship in Nyaya, just as I am." He only knows Nyaya up to this point because he hasn't met his guru. He hasn't met Raghunath Das Babaji. When he meets Raghunath Das and Guru, then everything's going to shift. But this is the prelude to that. By constantly uttering the pure names of Bhagavan, oh, I missed a bit. Nimai Pandit, scholarship in Nyaya, just as I should go to them and see whether they have any books that he has composed on Nyaya. Thinking like this, Brajanath developed a desire to associate with the devotees of Gauranga. By constantly uttering the pure names of Bhagavan, such as Nimai Pandit and Gora Hari, and by desiring to associate with the devotees of Gora, Brajanath earned tremendous sukriti. That's what I was just saying. He earned tremendous sukriti. Enough sukriti for him to meet Raghunath Das. One day, while Brajanath was taking a meal with his paternal grandmother, he asked, "Grandmother, did you ever see Gora Hari?" Upon hearing the name of Sri Gauranga, Brajanath's grandmother nostalgically remembered her childhood and said, "Aha, what an enchanting form he had. Alas, will I ever behold his beautiful sweet form again?" Of course, his form is that of Radha. So everyone was touched with that form of Radha. We're touched with the form of Jagannath. Can we imagine the form of Radha in the embodiment of Mahaprabhu? How intoxicatingly sweet and attractive that must have been. So his grandmother never forgot that impression. It's there in her heart. Can anyone who has seen that captivating form ever engage her mind in domestic affairs again? Just by seeing that form would transport you completely forever out of material consciousness. This was the mightiness, we can say, or the munificence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he wandered around in South India, liberating all those personalities, bringing them to a point of praying, just by seeing his form, his beautiful golden form, which is Sri Radhika directly. Anyone who has seen that captivating form ever engage his mind in domestic affairs again? When he performed Harinam Kirtan, absorbed in ecstatic trance, the birds, beasts, trees, and creepers of Navadvip would completely lose consciousness of the external world due to intoxication of praying. So not just the people. Grandmother is putting it right there. Beasts, the trees, the birds, the creepers, all would lose consciousness in praying. So grandmother was aware of this. Very often the grandmothers who are very quiet, they absorb everything. But it's the male who has to have the talking part, the dialogue. Even now, when I contemplate these thoughts, an incessant flow of tears streams uncontrollably from my eyes and soaks my breast. How beautiful. Brajanath inquired further, "Do you recall any pastimes that he performed?" Grandmother replied, "I certainly do, my son. When Sri Gauranga would visit the house of his maternal uncle with Mother Sachi, the elderly ladies of our house fed him shak, spinach, and rice. He would praise the shak very highly and eat it with great prema. At that precise moment, Brajanath's own mother placed some shak on his plate. Seeing it and appreciating the serendipity of the moment, Brajanath became overjoyed. These are like little miracles. She's talking about, grandmother's talking about shak, and at that very same moment, his mother puts some shak on his plate. If your mind is alive and awake and connecting everything, it just adds to the faith. Yes, something is happening here. Something is calling here, he's thinking. Yes, that shak is coming at that exact time. Although Brajanath became overjoyed. This is the beloved shak of the logician Nimai Pandit, he said, and ate it with the utmost reverence. Although Brajanath was completely lacking in transcendental knowledge of absolute reality, he became extremely attracted to Nimai Pandit's brilliant scholarship. Indeed, the intensity of his attraction could not be estimated. Even the name of Nimai was a delight to his ears. When mendicants came to beg alms uttering Jai Sachinandan, he received them warmly and fed them. He would sometimes go to Mayapur, where he would hear the Babajis chanting the names of Gauranga, and he would ask them many questions about Gauranga's triumphant activities in the field of scholarship and learning. Okay, that's a good place to stop. We'll stop there for today. And tomorrow we're going to meet Raghunath Das Babaji. So this has been our very beautiful build-up to this character. So wonderful performing like this. So tomorrow we will hear about Raghunath Das Goswami. So Jai Sachinandan, Jai Gaura Hari, Jai Brajanath today, Jai Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Jai Jaiva-Dharma, Jai Vaishnavas, Vanchakalpatarupyascha, Kripa Sindhu Bevacham, Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha. Go Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol. Done.